Okay, I'm just waiting for this to show up on YouTube so I can make sure that it doesn't interrupt us this time. And I'm looking and seeing it setting up. It's now on YouTube, and I am pausing it. Okay, great. Hello, and welcome to episode 104 of Jung at Harp. Today we're talking about giving up control to the power of connection. And I am Deborah Henson-Conant. I'm a composer performer, and I am here with Kathleen Wiley, who is a Jungian psychoanalyst. We both play the harp, so we call this Jung at Harp. And each week we meet to ask ourselves a question that we discover together. This is about conversation and the power of conversation, of not bringing something that we know the answer to, but bringing something we don't know the answer to that we're going to explore together. So I had a question this week because for the last 12 weeks, I've had this goal of creating an interest list for The Golden Cage, which is my musical. The film is coming out in February. I thought it was going to come out in December, so I wanted to have this a list of 2,000 people to send out to. And so I made my structure for doing this, and my outcome was going to be 2,000 people on interest list. Well, I got to the time when I was checking on this number, and there were only 943 people. And I was like, I didn't meet my goal. But in fact, I'm doing this with a team. And it turns out, in a conversation, I found out that the actor has a list of 1,500 people. And we're doing a concert on November 30th, and he has this list of 1,500 people. And the company that we're working with has a list of 18,000 people. And all the other creatives have lists. And I began to realize that I had it, that this list had to be created by me in a specific way. Otherwise, it didn't count. And so I had to decide whether I was going to declare that this project was, I had accomplished it or I hadn't accomplished it. And I was like, no, I didn't accomplish it because I didn't accomplish it myself and I didn't do it in the right way. When in fact, it was abundantly accomplished when I opened up to the possibility of doing it collaboratively and it not all having to be done in a certain way. So I wanted to ask you about this because I see this all the time in Hip Harp Academy, that the people will create something and they'll be like, yeah, but it's not perfect, or yeah, but it isn't this, or it didn't do that, when in fact it is something magnificent that makes a connection. It just isn't exactly what they had intended. So what is this all about, and how can we open up to this true connection? Because my goal was, how do I, connect to people who want to know about this show? And yet I was shutting this down because it wasn't perfect.
Well, and I think the key there in what you said is it didn't happen in the way you imagined. And
Right.
we can get so attached to the way our ego imagines that something should happen. And this is part of the shadow side of all of our goal setting and cognitive behavioral techniques and ego-driven psychology, is that we can lose sight that there are forces that work on our behalf that we aren't even aware of. I mean, it makes me think of the beautiful quote by Goethe, which I have hanging on the wall of my house, and I've had there for, 25 or 30 years. Until one is committed, there's hesitancy, the chance to draw back regarding all acts of initiative and creation. But once one is committed, then providence moves to a whole stream of events issues forth from the decision. Whatever you dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic. And then there's one other line I always forget. But okay. That's providence calling.
Exactly.
Sometimes I show up at unbidden, inconvenient times. And so in a way, what happened is when you were having that conversation with the other creatives, the phone rang and the actor said, oh, I have 1,500 people. And the creative director and whomever said, oh, I have a list of 18,000. And you're having to say, oh, wow, there is a lot more
Right.
interest than I alone could generate.
Right. And I had forgotten, I have so can be so ego driven with this that I think that it's all about me and it's all about what I can do.
Yes.
And as I give up control and begin to realize that it's not all about me. It's less and less about me as the work that I create goes out into the world and it gets in literally into other people's hands and other people's voices. It's all about them. And every morning I ask myself, what am I living for? And
Mhm.
the answer is to step out of my own darkness with a light that illuminates in others.
Mhm.
And and yet at the same time, I'm like, yeah, it's going to illuminate others, but it's going to have my name on it. And so I can tell that was really me. And I'm beginning to realize, no, it just illuminates in others. And that my job is to open my eyes to that illumination and to see it and to acknowledge it and then to connect with it and realize the value of it. See that. So I mean, I'm seeing that very
Yeah.
starkly because this particular piece of art has been hidden for many years and now it is out and it is more and more out. And I'm seeing it that it's empowering other people's voices. So this is all happening very literally for me.
Mhm.
How, but I know that it is happening all the time for all of us, that what we have committed to is starting to show up in others. So how can we see that more? And so that we give up stopping it. We give up trying to control it.
Yeah. You know, in alchemy, they talk that one of the principles is the principle of polarity and opposites, which Jung says everything in our psyche exists with its opposite, and that every universal energy within us has both a life-giving side and a destructive side, or what we might talk about as light and dark. And if you're called on one pole, like the pole of control, like the pole of, I want this list of 2000 and this is the only way it can happen, then you get polarized on one end. And so, in order to let go of that, you have to start to cultivate the opposite. And so, you know, people often make the mistake when they want to change, quote, a bad habit, or they want to stop a behavior that gets them in, hurtful situations. They keep just trying to cut that off. But the problem is they don't have anything to replace it. There's nothing to hold on to when that tendency comes up. And so something in you held on to what matters most. And we were talking about this before we started the recording as the essence or one's purpose or the pneumon, that thing in itself. And that
Oh,
thing in it,
the numenon. I call it
yeah,
numenon.
the
I don't know how it's
noumenon.
said.
Yeah, the
Right. Okay.
noumenon. And that thing in itself, that what matters most for you is the connection. You want people to have a connection to the golden cage. You want them to
Right.
be in the loop of what's happening and when it's released.
And I
That,
want that, I want it to be available to them after having controlled the availability for so long.
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
noumenon. That's the essence that
Yeah.
matters. And
Right.
when you get caught in, oh, that's got to look a certain way. So
Right.
when it's got to look a certain way, the ego gets over controlling.
Mm-hmm.
And when
Mm-hmm.
the ego can say, okay, yeah, I'm going to do my email list, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to open up to where might the phone call come that intrudes
Right.
and interrupts
Right.
my
Right.
my focus, but it's the door open to the essence
Mm.
of what I want more fully.
Wow. We've talked about this. We've talked about the magic intrusion, and I know we want to have an episode. You're making, as you were speaking, I realized that something has happened I've wanted to happen my whole life. So years and years and years ago, I had a PE teacher, a physical education teacher, who talked about the how any physical activity happens. And she said that in any physical activity, the complete activity is the effort, but it's also the glide. And if you are, she was talking about swimming, but it was for anything. And if you are not in the glide, you are not, it's not complete. You're not doing it. And it's all effort and no glide. And so all my life I've been like, when do I get the glide? When is the glide coming? How am I going to feel the glide? Like, am I doing the glide yet? And I just realized in this conversation, as you were speaking, I realized, oh my God, for myself as a composer, the glide is in others. That's where the glide happens. That's where the water, streams back and I see that and I'm feeling that momentum. It's not going to happen in me, but I can love it and enjoy it through other people. But I have been shut down to that collaboration for so long. It's a thing. I've just always felt like I have to do it myself. And that's changing now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm that glide. I'm thinking about because I swim. That's part of my exercise routine, and it's such a beautiful stress release. But and I forget the guy's name who wrote a book called Total Immersion that's about swimming.
Mm,
And when you were talking about the glide, it made me think about a place where he talks about in swimming, like just letting it happen, like having that pause where you're not kicking constantly, but there's like a nanosecond you don't. This is how I understand it. If the author were here, he might say it differently, or if a swim coach were here. But like when you're doing that stroke and you're turning to move forward, that your legs actually pause on the kick, so you feel the glide, you feel the efforts you made moving you forward. It's kind of like, reminds me of what it would be providence in Goethe's quote, that there's some flow we're in that if we can let ourselves feel it. And as you release the golden cage and share your other compositions, part of it for you is feeling the flow that's taking that out into the larger ocean of the world.
right, right. And the release, and when you said that pause, I'm thinking you release the activity, you listen. And I'm realizing that I'm always that's one of the things that I teach in the academy is the art of being able to listen as you play, actually hear and respond and enjoy as you're playing. And I'm realizing that I have shut myself off from that listening to life, being so convinced that I was never doing enough and therefore I must do more in order for my work to have its resonance. And in this moment, I'm just realizing a whole other um, aspect and element of creative resonance, which
Mm.
is the principle of the strings of passion, which I'll be teaching in 2023. That's a whole other part of it, is the creative resonance will happen in others. It will happen
Yeah.
through and being able to actually hear that, glide on it, listen as you play. And
Yeah.
oh wow. I mean, it's so interesting to see how controlled I've been, that I always thought of creative resonance as my relationship to my instrument, that the resonance will come through me and then through the instrument. But I'm seeing that as we open up to the world, we can see it in others. Sorry, I'm just having this epiphany in the moment and then we are all one. I mean, that starts to be, sorry, now I'm thinking about how about the people I don't want to be one with. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to go down that. Take it away, Kathleen. I'm off on a little rabbit hole here. Take us
Well, I'm
back.
thinking about the creative resonance, and I'm thinking about the space between the notes that are played, and how
Mm,
particularly with the harp, because of the sustain, how there's so
right,
much music in the spaces that if
right.
we fill the spaces, we miss the music. And in some ways, isn't that true of our life, that we can have our agenda, our plan, our goal, how we're going to make the goal happen, and then we miss what comes into the space. We miss what is already in motion. Because in a way, I think of music as this archetypal stream that we just tap into, that we become a part of, and that flows through us. And that's a very different way of being present to what I'm playing than if somehow my ego feels like it's creating this thing. Now, what we know, and we know this in our own psyche, is that the ego's relationship and psyche to the unconscious informs the unconscious. It's like I think of it like a figure 8 or an infinity sign, that the energy is constantly flowing through and thus transforming one another. I think that's true of our contribution to music, or our going into it, that what we offer, what we create, so to speak, does become a part of the whole, and thus changes and enhances the whole as we're enhanced and changed by the whole. So now I think I'm off on a tangent.
Well, I'm just, okay. There's so much that's coming to me from you. I wanted to play a note and try what you were just saying, but it also reminded me about performing. How I'll be up on stage and I'll be performing and performing and performing and playing all these notes and this instrument, and then the audience claps. And one thing I love about that moment is I've been doing all this intricate stuff, and they do with the same hands, their hands, they do this fundamental, just beautiful, and it's so joyous, and it just always says to me, yes, and this too is music. We don't need the instrument, we don't need the dexterity. This too is music, and it is so joyful, and it's almost like the thing that really fills the theater is that joyful clapping that holds all the music in it. And that is the resonance that's in which we've had an experience together, the audience, and that's our names at that point, the audience and the artist. But I was thinking that someone yesterday was talking about a composition. She had transferred from one instrument to another, and from the pedal harp to the concert harp. And it's very difficult to do that because the concert harp has all kinds of capabilities that are different from, it's hard to transfer from one to the other. And I don't know if I will be able to actually show this, but what she said was, because the harp itself is singing so much, she could do many other things, that because the harp continued, once you set it into motion, it continues. That allows me to take my sorry, that's in the way. Let me pull this out of the way and do it just once again. Allow the harp to sing. So the harp is singing, and then my hands. It sounds like both all the parts of the harp are in motion, because they are. This is just in the motion of resonance as I'm playing more notes. And that's what part of what I heard you saying, is to allow that other resonance to be as we are listening and playing in our lives.
Absolutely. As you were doing that, I can't help but think about the analogy to our unconscious self, which we're all far more unconscious than we are conscious. And in a way, our ego, when we get caught in our goals and our plans and our agendas, it's like the top hand that gets really busy doing things. But the unconscious and the larger self that just holds and stables is like that harmony and that bass that's just there and solid and goes on. It's not busy running all over the place. It's the essence is just there in the background. And when the ego can slow down enough, or in that case, when the hands can slow down enough, we hear something we wouldn't otherwise hear. And this, I think, is part of giving up ego control in order to experience the power of connection. I'm always chuckling about unconscious synchronicities. So even as we started, when your phone started ringing, it's like, okay, yeah, isn't this the truth of it? That when the larger self, that unconscious, and the bass or the harmony keeps going, that sometimes, and isn't this why harpists muffle? They don't want that intrusion. They want the melody not intruded upon by that. And, but in truth, can we be open to what comes unexpected and unbidden? You maybe in the back of your mind knew all these other people involved in the golden cage were starting their own list, or maybe you didn't. But what
Right.
a wonderful intrusion on that part of you that was starting to declare a failure, to realize, wow, we've not failed at all collectively. In fact, this is a big,
Right. And
but not tenfold success. I wanted 2020.
right. 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 And that it already existed. And this is, as you were saying that, so much came to my mind. And first of all, nothing against harpists who muffle. I muffle too. There's nothing wrong. And yet what you were saying is a beautiful analogy. Yesterday, in a very similar thing, and I really want to say this because I have a feeling this is at play in many people's lives and they don't realize it. I'm doing a new program called Holiday Lead Sheet Boot Camp, where people are learning how to read lead sheets to play music, and it lets them play a lot of music very quickly. And I had this whole idea of how it was going to be and how I was going to do these new things, and I had promised, and I wasn't able to meet my promise, and it was really distressing me. And then yesterday I was like, well, what if I sit down and just make everything that we already have more accessible? Because I have a feeling people may not know where it is. And so I spent 2 or 3 hours just creating a new organization where everything that already exists was outlined and very accessible with links. And when I showed it to all the members of the Academy last night, they were like, oh my God, this is wonderful. There's so much here. And until you just spoke, I didn't realize that this is the same principle. There is so much already here. And the same thing of this. Once I play that, there is so much there for me to play into. It's already there. And I keep thinking that I have to make more and more and more, and that there is nothing there. There is no resonance. And in fact, we all have so much. And what you said about the phone call, it made me realize, and it's calling us all the time to let us know that it's there.
Yeah,
and I know we don't have much more time, but for this session.
But I think that's so true. And, this is part of why I am so passionate about the embodiment circle I offer. And if you're interested, you can go to innerdivinespirit.com and click on online sacred circles and get that information. But it's because it's always there. There's so much wisdom in our being for living, for our music, for everything. If we can still our mind, our ego control, cognitive processes enough to hear it. And, and we have to build psychic muscle to do that, just like there's a certain amount of skill you have to play your instrument. And, whether it's the harp or other. And so learning to listen and developing the muscles of listening. And what happens is when we listen, we start to feel what is like the baseline of our own being. And then the ego doesn't get nearly as scared and frenetic.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, what I'm getting from this is, if I can hear that bass, what is there for me to step into, then I can sing into it. I'm also getting today that that what I'm seeking for may already be there. It is likely it is already there, and it is for me to collect it and be able to see it and know what it is. And it is very likely not that I have to create it all over again, but that it is a matter of connecting to it and seeing it in other people and then connecting to them.
That's right.
So, Kathleen, thank you again for a wonderful conversation that I came in wondering about this question and go out with a new way of connecting to it and understanding it. And thank you everybody for joining us for Jung at Harp. You can connect with me at hipharp.com. That's hip as in cool, harp as in the instrument, and with Kathleen at innerdivinespirit.com. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing all of you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.